All right. We are here for the final 5 reading with Barak. Thank you, Barak. Act 3, we're doing 4 chapters.
4 chapters and
Five,
an epilogue.
five.
With an epilogue. 4.
With the epilogue. Yeah. Yeah, that didn't go as planned.
Start over.
Am I reading that? Is that-
No,
is that what
okay.
that is?
So it is Act
Good
3,
Wasn't my best one.
in which they try, then try again, and it's also called the Book of Trial. And we left our heroes last time with them rushing out of the church. Garrett basically saying, "Let's go save the world," after they've figured out what they believe the challenge is that they need to resolve. And we'll see if they succeed in doing so. All right, let's just jump into it. Oh, actually, probably want to say one thing. This is easier to understand when you see the written form, so I'm going to tell you this. The chapter headings for this one are, we talked about peeling the onion. This is the peeling of the heroes. So each chapter heading will tell you that one of the heroes or more than one disappearing or being eliminated from the story. So that's how we structure it. All right, Act 3, Chapter 1, 4. Aidan met them in the tunnels. The whole place is warming up and we had to retreat closer to the surface. Then he grinned. I never imagined how much fun I could have being a werewolf. It's even better than using my bow. How's the militia holding up? Lomek asked. Not great. Your dad has done a great job at treating the injured, but he can't keep up with so many, nor can he fix the dead. We've lost at least 200 to the monsters, and at least as many are incapacitated. The soldiers who come back from the church are less enthusiastic. I'm worried about morale. There are some deserters already. Tell you what, though, he turned to Nael, Darian is down there and he's something else. I mentioned to him you were my sister, and he's been next to me every step of the way. Refuses to get treatment either. Says he'll fight until he can't. Never seen anybody so brave. Nael smiled and hugged her brother. Yes, he's a good man and very loyal. Keep him alive, okay? I know I broke his heart, but he was always very sweet with me. Aidan brushed back Nael's hair and looked at her fondly. Don't worry, sis, I'll keep an eye on him. Then he transformed into a wolf. All right, I have to go back. I hope the plan works, he shouted as he ran into a tunnel leading down. In an uncharacteristic move, Lavatown authorities had made passage out free for anyone wishing to depart, even from the lower shelves. As a result, the beach was deserted. There, they made their first attempt. Even the constant blending with ocean waters was not sufficient to stop the waters within the volcano from getting warmer, as if being slowly heated on a stovetop. Or, in this case, the top of a small sun in the form of an entirely improbable crystal. With newfound knowledge of her purpose as guardian, Solace dove under the surface and swam. Sometime later, she materialized on the beach. She started speaking before realizing she still had her protective air bubble on and flicked it away. It's definitely getting warmer, more so the nearer I got to the crystal, she said. There are other changes. I noticed another kind of barrier in place. It's like a dome that sits some distance above the crystal, masking it from view, making it look from the outside like a deep, dark hole. I can't tell if it will prohibit crossing by other living things. I'm allowed past it, but I can sense a tingle that feels like a test. I tried tossing pebbles at it, and they go through, but the fish don't. They either stay above or below it. I was repelled again when I tried to touch the crystal, but I was prepared, so it didn't knock me out. Looks like there's a kind of magic involved that I didn't think was possible, because I found myself here without any sense of having traveled. Why would it be impossible? Garrett asked. Because teleportation is essentially the elimination of something in one place and recreating it in another. Elimination is easy, but recreation would violate the way magic works. I'll figure it out if we live through this, Solace answered. If we live through this, then you won't be with us any longer, Lomek pointed out. I suppose there's that, Solace responded. I wish I had my immortal memories. That would help answer a lot of questions. So what do you think the next step? Nael asked. We knew it wasn't going to be easy. I tried sensing your soul from here, Solace, but I was cut off by the barrier. Your soul just disappeared. Can you extend your air bubble to me? If I can get past the barrier, then maybe I can follow you all the way to the crystal to understand how your soul can transition into it. Solis considered it for a moment. I can do it so long as you stay close to me, like we did when we crossed Stonebridge. That's another limit I discovered. Anything I do doesn't stick if I'm not around. I think it's the biggest difference between my magic and that of a wizard, actually. Mine can be a lot more powerful and varied than theirs. I can do almost anything I can think of, but it's tied to my presence. Someone like Talus could create an effect that stays forever, like with the shelf floors or the flying boxes. I have no intention of straying away, Niall laughed. All right, Guardian, do me good. With Niall following Solis, they made their second attempt. The others were waiting for them to materialize when Solis's head popped out of the water. Help me, quick, she shouted. They jumped in and helped carry Niall's unbreathing body onto the beach. Lomek, do something now, she's drowning. Confused, Lomek leaned over Niall and placed his hands over her chest. A magic-tinged aura appeared, and a few seconds later, she heaved and started coughing and spilling water. After she regained her composure, the two women explained what happened. We went down to the barrier and I crossed it, Solis said. Niall was following me closely, and we tested it first to make sure that being a couple of feet apart won't break the air link. But as soon as I crossed, I could feel the bubble shrinking. I immediately crossed back, and there she was, struggling. I grabbed her and swam up as quickly as I could. From my perspective, it looked like Solis disappeared, Niall said. Everything was going fine. It does look foreboding when you get close, the darkest of dark voids, and the mere idea of trying to make progress is terrifying. The only reason I was even able to try was that I was focusing on her soul. Then she crossed, and all of a sudden, all the links severed. The air bubble was gone, her soul was gone, and I panicked. I do remember her coming back and grabbing me, but then I blacked out. As she finished talking, the mountain shook violently again, and they could hear things crashing in the distance. Solis cocked her head in the direction of the volcano's central shaft. It sounds like the shelves are starting to disintegrate, she said. That sounds pretty bad, Garrett said, then added. And I guess that this is probably not a good thing either. They turned and followed his gaze. The stone storm blocking Stonebridge had extended itself over the ocean near the edge of Lavatown itself. I seem to recall something about the peninsula having flesh-eating fog all over it too. I wonder if that's coming next, he added, lacking his customary enthusiasm. Is there any way for us to get closer to the crystal, Niall asked? Garrett and Solis exchanged a look. Why, yes, there is, he answered, his voice picking up again. Let's take you to prison. Pause before we move on. Anything, or we should go on?
Just one thing.
Yeah.
Confused me. The stone bridge, the stone what?
The stone storm,
Stone storm.
right? They're calling it the stone barrier now because they realize it's a divine barrier.
Yeah, I missed that.
But it's now basically you have a bunch of boulders flying all around this huge peninsula, like in a constant.
Like an orbit.
Yeah, they're basically surrounding it.
You know,
So
it's
just
the-
imagine this peninsula that's 20, 30 miles long, something like that, with this massive amount of stone, huge boulders flying all around it in a barrier. Right?
Is this the first? Is this the first time we've heard of flesh-eating fog?
No. So if you recall when this came up in the writings that they found from Zacharias, right? He said there were barriers, and one of the barriers he mentions was the flesh-eating fog.
Okay, I must have missed that then. because-
Also Niall's mom, Enrielle, talked about it too. Right, so this is just a tie into that. That's one of the other barriers that were placed to protect the soul bird.
Sounds like it sucks.
Pretty challenging, right?
Fog, don't walk into that.
Right. All right, we good? Act 3, Chapter 2, 5. Garrett ran through the tunnels as fast as his little legs could carry him. The air was getting muggy. It took him some time to navigate the makeshift blockades, fallen debris, and constant stream of injured soldiers. He could hear the sounds of battle from below, something he could swear was not true when they headed out earlier. The lines of defense were definitely being pushed back and upwards. Eventually, he emerged at the outer shallows and headed towards the docks. There he stopped, calmed his breathing, and disappeared. Crossing the docks at daytime while staying entirely unseen would have been challenging at normal times. Doing so when they were crawling with Lavatown militia was nigh impossible. But Garrett was no stranger to impossible feats of stealth. His guild training stood him in good stead as he tiptoed, skipped and jumped a tortured, circuitous path towards the Steadfast Inn, relying on every ounce of his unusual ability to melt into shadows and hide in plain sight. Even so, he was almost caught a couple of times, but Solis, who had been listening to his progress, relayed his predicament to Nael, and she, in turn, projected phantom noises that provided enough distraction for Garrett to slink away. When he got past the saloon doors, he heard Nael whisper in his ear, "We're at the spot, Garrett. Take your time, but don't take too long. The water here is much warmer than at the edge of the ocean. We're slowly roasting, and Solis can't figure out how to keep us cool. The crystal is messing up her magic." "I'll be right there," he replied under his breath and moved rapidly around the main room. It was converted into a makeshift headquarters. Trina and her staff were tending to everyone. The lieutenant was there, heading the futile effort to save the town from the deep monsters. He looked very pale, and Garrett noted that he had his arm in a sling and was leaning on a crude crutch, his leg amputated above the knee. Garrett wondered if Rajiv could restore lost limbs. He made it to the hallway and down the stairs to the empty room where it all started. It had been cleaned of debris, and the bare walls and lack of trimmings made it feel like a huge underground cave, in stark contrast to its original luxurious setting. It took Garrett but a short moment to trigger the trapdoor in the back closet. Solis, Lomek, and Nael climbed through it. "Ouch and ouch again," Nael said. "A few more minutes and my skin would be peeling off." "Yes, it wasn't pleasant," Lomek nodded, "but we aren't burned, at least not yet." The handle on the main door rattled, followed by a heavy knock. "Who's there?" someone shouted. Garrett smiled sheepishly. "I guess I locked it when I came in." More angry knocks followed. "Open up this door at once," someone shouted again. They could hear a muffled conversation and departing footsteps. "We don't have much time. I already opened the hatch," Garrett said and pointed towards it. "Go." The others descended hastily into the chute. Nael went last, and Garrett quickly closed the hatch over her head. "I'll stay and make sure they don't follow you for at least a couple of minutes," he whispered urgently. "Good luck." They rushed to the aquarium. "So how do we get past this thing?" Lomek asked. "Didn't you guys say it needed someone on the other side?" Solis nodded. "Yes, it does." She pointed towards the floor. "Nael, do me a favor and project a message roughly to the bottom of the tube. It's perhaps 20 feet down from here, and a similar distance in the same direction we're heading." "A message? What should I say?" Nael looked at Solis in surprise. "Just say, 'Do it now.'" Solis was holding an aquarium key in her hand. "Make it loud." "Whatever you're doing, do it quickly," Lomek whispered. "I can hear them opening the hatch." Nael blinked, then shrugged her shoulders and proceeded to speak, while Solis attached the key to a plate next to the door. A second later, it rotated into the wall and disappeared. A middle-aged gnome was waiting on the other side. "I see you brought some new friends with you," he chuckled, then extended his hand. "I'm Carrot." As they took turns shaking it, Solis said, "Yes, these are the other two, Nael and Lomek. Thank you for sticking to our agreement, my friend." "Of course, that's why we made it. I guess in case everything goes awry," Carrot responded. "It was a good plan. I guess I can still be useful in my gnome form." Lomek looked at Carrot. "You're the rat from the prison?" Carrot nodded happily. "Yes, I was about to unrat, and Solis thought she might need a backup plan and asked if I'd wait here while I was in gnome form. Usually I head out of the prison for my gnome phase, but there isn't anybody else here right now, and it sounded interesting. Judging by the shaking and the rising ambient temperatures, I guess something is happening." "Yes, something is definitely happening," Solis said. "Not that we could keep you away, but you're welcome to join us." She looked at Carrot. "But it's likely we're all going to die." Carrot returned her gaze. "Dying while learning is the best way to die." They entered the torture chamber. "Geez," Nael said as she eyed the various instruments. "Seems efficient." "Aye," Lomek said. "Also, I wonder why this place stays cool." "There are different layers of protective magic around this chamber," Solis said. "It's the closest we can get to the crystal without being underwater." She gestured at the floor. "The soul barrier runs right under here. I felt it when I went through the first time. Now I know what it is." "How did you do that?" Nael stamped on the floor a couple of times with her boot. "Through there," Solis pointed at the Iron Maiden. "Don't worry, if you know how, you won't get hurt." A second passed in silence. "Oh, sure, why not?" Nael said. "Won't be any crazier than the rest of it. So what do I need to do?" That was the third attempt. It ended very quickly. Nael stepped inside the Iron Maiden, making sure to push against the pressure points. Solis triggered the mechanism and closed the device carefully. Ow, no, take me out. They heard Nael shrieking from inside. Solis hurriedly opened the door. What happened, she asked. Didn't the floor drop? It did, Nael climbed out, and I found myself sitting on the surface of the water, which is pretty fucking hot, by the way, but somehow not falling in. Wait, how come you're not injured from the spikes? Lomek asked. They back off before piercing your skin. Nael rubbed the backs of her thighs. Damn, it's almost scalding. Oh, it makes sense that they would retract, Solis murmured. See, when I went through, I just barely felt them before I fell in the water, she added. They looked at each other. Can you travel there ethereally? Nael asked. Maybe I can join you that way. No, I tried it, Solis answered. The barrier stops me from crossing it that way. It seems like you two have something in mind that I don't understand. Lomek raised his eyes to look at Solis. I thought the goal was for Nael to take a look at the crack to see if she could help figure out how you can enter the crystal. It sounds like you have another idea. Nael took Lomek's hand in hers. Yes, sorry, Mac. I think we both realized along the way that I need to be her soul guide. Her guide, Lomek repeated. But if we're to believe Zacharias, then that means... Nael nodded. No, he yelled and jumped in front of the Iron Maiden. I won't let you. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. She was never supposed to be here, but you are, and I won't lose you. I won't. Carrot, who was standing forgotten in the corner, cleared his throat. This may be the wrong moment, but might I inquire as to the nature of this conversation? It sounds rather intriguing, and, well, who knows? Maybe I can help.
You left me wanting more.
All right, we'll just jump right in unless somebody has comments. Okay. Act 3, Chapter 3, 2 and 3. They spent a few precious minutes outlining their theory to Carrot. When they were done, he spoke. I got it. The only physical body that can go through is Solis, but you need Nael to join in order to help figure out the mystery of why Solis can't get back in the crystal. Carrot thought for a moment. But didn't you also say that Nael is a soul mage, was it? In that case, why can't you join physical Solis in spiritual form? They looked at him in astonishment. By the gods, he's right, Nael said. I've been thinking about this all wrong. Of course, if I can see everybody else's souls and their anchor points, then I should be able to see my own as well. It never even occurred to me. And if I can see it, I can manipulate it like I did with the talisman. Looking inside ourselves is always the hardest, Solis said. What are you talking about? Lomek, who was still standing in front of the Iron Maiden, demanded. Nael turned to him. Solis is going to go in, and I'm going to join her on the way down by loosening my own anchor and attaching my soul to hers. You know we have to do this, Mac, and we don't have much time. Lomek gave her a look that was at once so loving and so hurt that it brought tears to her eyes. Please, Mac, let's not make it harder than it needs to be. Carrot cleared his throat again. Excuse me. I think it is still perhaps the wrong moment, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. He smiled awkwardly. First, you don't know you'll make it this time either. They all agreed that he was right. More importantly, he continued, if you don't make it, then somehow Nael's soul will need to reattach to her body. Otherwise, it might dissipate entirely and leave you without recourse. And if her body had already stopped living due to the departure of her soul, then she might fail. Nael stared at him. Shit, you're right, she muttered. So what do we do? Lomek took a couple of steps away from the Iron Maiden. I think I know the answer to that, he sounded relieved. I'm pretty sure Thor will allow me to keep your body in stasis while you travel with her. But Nael, please promise me you'll come back. Don't go into the crystal with her. Nael bent down and hugged him for a long moment. I will, Meg. I want to come back, she whispered. Then she turned to Solis and said, are we ready to try it? And so began their fourth attempt. With Nael's soul riding shotgun, Solis created a protective bubble that surrounded her entire body, and let herself down through the hole and the long, curving, submerged tube leading towards the crystal. When they emerged above it, Nael, who was seeing it for the first time, was so awed that for a second she forgot that she was only there in spirit and involuntarily tried to flinch. Even for Solis, the view was surprising. The crystal had truly come alive, the two souls buried within, moving at an impossible speed, their frantic oars causing the crystal to shed magical energy in blinding amounts, their gyrations slowly widening the crack. It had grown dramatically and was now almost half the way across. Solis realized that the crystal was nearing the point of breaking. They could also see the magma peeking from below. As they got near the crystal, Nael focused on the soul threads, something that only she could see. She guided Solis towards the infinitely tiny soul anchor where the crack began, and Solis noted dryly that she could never have found it herself. Otherwise, it seemed simple. Once Solis knew where the point was, she just needed to touch it and let her soul through. Nael closed her eyes in preparation for trying to find her way back to her waiting vessel. She could just about feel it, and Lomek's caring presence devotedly hovering over it. Then everything went wrong all at once, and she barely had the presence of mind to guide both of them to reappear in the room above. What happened? Lomek asked, removing his hands from Nael's midsection. The two women stood up. It was similar to what happened before, Solis said. I very nearly got there, and then I got punched in the gut. Although we ended up here instead of on the beach. I think you did that, Nael, right? Yes, Nael answered, and I saw something. It's important. You weren't punched out. We were snapped back here to Mek. It was clear as day. There is something you two have to resolve before Solis is allowed back into the crystal. They looked at her in confusion. She shrugged. Just telling you what I saw. Solis stared at Lomek for several seconds. Then her face changed as she was hit with a sudden realization before taking on a look of deep remorse. Oh, Lomek, I'm so sorry. I took over your body when I came out of the crystal. That must have been painful. As she said it, Lomek started crying openly. I don't know how my immortal self thinks, Solis continued, but it surely had no grasp of what it must mean for a soul to lose its vessel right when it's getting anchored to it. I cannot possibly imagine how devastating it must be to live your entire life in the wrong body. I'm really, really sorry, she said, then went to her knees and embraced the weeping dwarf. Is it working? Terror to seem to materialize from thin air whispered in Nael's ears. She shook her head slowly. Almost. So that's what her shame was about, not for failing in her task, but for stealing his vessel. Her soul is actually trying to disentangle and free the body up for him, but he won't let her leave. Lomek hesitantly raised his arms and returned the embrace. He cried even harder, and Solis shocked everybody, herself included, by crying as well. After a few more moments, Lomek gathered himself and mumbled, I know, Solis, I know. He sniffed loudly and took a step back from the comically tall, miserable human with her funny ears. Thank you for that, Solis. I mean it. I like my body now. I'm used to it. It's the only one I'd ever known. He sighed deeply, then said, I'm going to keep it, and I forgive you. Everyone in the small room could feel a wave of energy being released. You're free, Solis, Nael exclaimed. That was it. Mek had to forgive you for taking his body from him. Solis and Lomek ignored her, holding hands and looking at each other. Then they slowly let go. Solis turned to Nael. I think we should try going in again, she said. They set up the same way, with Lomek positioned over Nael's body, and Nael riding shotgun with Solis's soul. That was their fifth and final attempt. It went smoothly and without any hitches, almost disappointingly so, considering. At the very end, when Solis reached her finger down towards the crack, Nael shut her eyes, anticipating the need to re-anchor both of them back into the room and to Lomek. But she would make the trip alone, secure in the knowledge of their success. They floated gently, the last fraction of an inch, and the wild mage touched the crystal, and Nael was gone. It was the right moment for me to reveal myself.
What?
Huh? Sorry. Who? What?
Da, da, da. Yeah, enter Barack.
Sorry, I'm lost.
Your
I
description.
managed not to crack up before I got there. I presume you would like me to just proceed?
Okay.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
question, or other questions.
Yeah, it'll
That's
be
surprising.
funny, right? I'm supposed to be confused, right?
You're supposed to be both emotional and shocked at this point. I
Yeah,
don't know if you all both.
I have to say the description that you've given of like, you know, the threads and going in and like the how that soul is, I got completely immersed in that.
That's cool.
That was very, very well done.
Thank you.
Go.
Go, go, go.
Act 3, chapter 4, the very last chapter of the book, titled 1. Hey, Is, I said as I froze time and restored all of their memories. Oh, hi, they responded after they took a moment to reintegrate. Say, X, I'd like to stick to female pronouns for a while. I grew fond of them recently, she added. Of course, Is, I said. That has always been your special quality, the immortal with mortal emotions. You are, after all, why I wrote this story and why I devised the test for you and put you in the crystal with the 2 dragons. She considered it for a moment. Right, it was never about choosing between the 2. Neither of them was worthy on their own, were they? No, I said, not unless they understood that they needed to become one. Still, a shame to waste such power. Rarely do mortals grow so powerful that they can join us. It was all about my emotional capacity then, she said. You know, you could have told me that, X. When I didn't respond, she continued. But then again, if you did, then there would be no test and they would kill each other. I'm curious, did you really want them to succeed? I think it's something I learned from you, Is. All of us did. The idea of boredom. It's the sort of thing that mortals suffer from, isn't it? I figured their struggle would be interesting to watch. And if those 2 could work it out, if one of the dragons would guide the soul of the other so they could merge and join us in Celestia, then we might have enjoyed it. I paused. At least judging by Thor, I think I was right. Thor has been a total revelation, Is. So much fun. Frigg has decided to let them shape this world's fate for a while. They seem pretty invested in it. Do Thor truly think of themselves as one? Is asked. Yes, otherwise they couldn't have made it to Celestia. Though, come to think of it, they do use the male pronouns a lot, like you do the female. He gets so wonderfully excited by being a god, even if he is still such a very minor one. The old god is getting a little jealous, which is also distinctly mortal. Look at what you've done, Is, I laughed. She projected the image over her mortal body, smacking its forehead. Damn, X, it finally occurred to me why my mortal parents were inspired to call me Solus. I smiled. It was apparent. You are a Solar Guardian and your name is so Sol is kind of suggested itself. Speaking of which, you were a bit enthusiastic about it all, no? You couldn't possibly know that you were forcing your human body to grow, but what made you stop? Whether I knew it consciously or not, at some point it was apparent, she laughed. But I get your point. She thought for a moment. So when you put me into crystal, I wasn't being punished, was I? I realize it now. You wanted to see if I could use my compassion to get the dragons to cooperate. And also get you out of the way for a bit, I admitted. That's why I had to take all your memories, or at least I thought so then. These mortal emotions you have, they are a new thing, and new things can make us quite nervous. Well, some of us anyway, don't like new things. I paused. Now I realize that perhaps I didn't need to do that. By way of explanation, I shared the rest of the story with her. You really are a terrible liar, and for that matter, storyteller, she laughed again. I didn't think I was that bad. I felt offended, which I took a moment to cherish. Being in the presence of is always such a learning experience. And it was fun to tell this tale, even if my grasp of emotions is limited. Once the 5 of you learned to trust each other, I didn't have to describe things anymore, and instead just reported on what you were saying. You pretty much told your own story after that. Our story? Really? What about your deceptions? There were never any wizards in the Shallows? Why did you even come up with that one, X? It was my turn to laugh. It wouldn't be as much fun if I stated that the innkeeper was the wizard Talus and not just the dwarven Boven. She considered. And since she is the only one who knows his secret, you twisted the tale of Enrielle to fit your needs. She was never anybody's whore, and definitely not his. I imagine Talus absolutely adores her. That was my biggest ruse, I admitted, but I enjoyed it, and I wasn't lying. The bond is very strong, And Riel did help Talos build the reputation of the place when she spent decades sleeping with so many because of how badly she missed Kenzer and Zacharias. I just pretended that she and the wizard didn't know each other. All I did was change a few words in their conversation. She nearly told all of you the truth herself, you know. That would have been fitting, Is reflected. Sadly, it never worked out for her, did it? It's impossible to get over being God's lover, let alone the two parts of one. It's too big of a void to fill. She paused. Oh, I see now. Talos is very old, isn't he? She's going to lose him soon, too, and she knows it. She was practically a child when they recruited her, and Talos is her last connection to them. I feel sorry for her, X. What Is could feel was beyond me. Do you think they figured out the rest? Who? The mortal audience? Does it matter? I retorted. In time, they might, or they will grow old and die. You do realize they will be reading this part too, don't you? She asked. Of course I do. I'm the one writing it, I said. I'd like to think that they're enjoying it. I'm sure they are. Many of them get very excited when they read books with stories that were written by gods. It makes them feel close to the divine. It's a little like what Enriel felt in the tunnels when Lomek got his blessing. But do at least tell the truth about the ones they care about, she pleaded. I projected aside. All right, Is. You understand the mortals much better than any of us do. So let me start with the healer, since you brought him up. He's actually a wild mage, but he doesn't know it. He's very earnest and his voice is strong, and Thor was a little too eager to get involved with him, even a bit careless. It takes a while to adapt to being a god, and the boy is a remote descendant. Thor's blessing didn't work, but wild mages can emulate lesser divine magic very well, and the healer is absolutely convinced of his nature, false as it might be. Oh, that explains a few things, she said quietly. I continued. The Sound Shaper is destined to be his soul guide, which she already suspects. But she believes him about being a healer, and that, of course, would make it impossible for her to serve as his guide. Divinity is guided by us, not the mortals. It makes her feel lost, but she's stubborn and will stay with him until she finds an answer. In the meantime, he is going to become far more powerful, so long as he works out his shame. Speaking of which, that's one emotion I hope we never catch back home. Do you think they can end up ascending like Thor? She asked. Perhaps. They are yet very immature, and the healer will first need to realize his true nature. If they don't die first, it will take them a few centuries to figure it all out. I'll be watching occasionally. It could be entertaining. Regardless, like Kenzer and Zacharias, these two are very compatible, and also like them, they will be great lovers. What about Aidan? The wood speaker? You really need me to spell it out? She waited. Fine. He's also a wild mage in his own unique way, a first of his kind. The soul spark he ingested from Talos through the talisman transformed him in more ways than just into a wolf. There has never been one that could combine the chaotic and the orderly before. She raised an ethereal eyebrow. Oh, you are such a delight, Is. All right. Yes, I did in fact guide Garrett a few times. Just a few times, she challenged me? It was you at the bridge, wasn't it? And on the stairway, and when you made poor Aidan take a dive, and all those other places where he did or said something that was downright dangerous or merely outrageous, yet somehow still nudged us forward? Not all of them, I chuckled. He's perfectly capable of getting into trouble on his own. And Garrett being your mouthpiece is also why you didn't write his origin story like you did with the others. I see that now. But it was definitely you that Nael saw. What scared her so much? She said quietly. Yes, of course. It seemed timely to intervene in a more obvious fashion, although I may have gotten caught up in the moment. She smiled. You really are getting emotional, X. So what now? Are you going to take my memories away again? No, I said. I realized that it was a mistake. It's hard enough with those two in the crystal. We've kept them in suspended animation, and they are just as stubborn as they ever were, and just as determined that only one of them will ascend. I understand this better now. Your compassion is the thing that might make it possible for them to solve their conundrum, but without your memories, how could you still have compassion? It appears like emotions and memories are tied together like two parts of a god. Yes, that's how it works, X. Memories are used to store emotions so as to better guide them as they go about their lives. Mortals need both. I do too. But it means that you are going to have to stick around here until the task gets done, or until you tell me that it will never be done. Are you okay with that? No going back to Celestia? That's kind of you, X. See, you actually care about me. I realized that she was right. True, I mused. How fascinating. But I meant it. Don't worry about me, X. First of all, I have memories of being the spark in the crystal, and that was pleasant, and it's going to be so much better if I have all my other memories too. In addition, the Soul Bridge allows me to visit many places now that I know how to use it. The first place I'll go is this Earth. It's so full of feelings, she whooped. There may be even more feelings when people there read this. And I can easily keep the crystal whole for as long as it takes, even if my attention isn't always focused on it. You're all like them as much as you are like us, I noted. I know, X, she smiled. Also, because I will have all my memories, I will be able to communicate with the other 4 if they came by to see me, which I suspect they will at some point, once they realize who and what they truly are, especially Lomic and Nayeb. I think it's inevitable that I will experience them again. She paused. And if the dragons continue, if the dragons figure out how to meld and complete their journey, X, I'll stay down here to make sure the crystal doesn't collapse. I grew to like this place and all its people and their feelings. I'd like to keep it safe. Safe? I asked in surprise. But it doesn't matter if it's destroyed. I can always recreate it for you, yes. Recreate all the places. It will only take an instant. But I wouldn't want you to, she said. It's something you won't be able to understand, X, but emotions and memories become fused through time. And when it happens to a lot of models over a very long period, it creates history. And history is full of really amazing feelings. I considered it. All right, Is. I guess you've earned the right to determine your own fate. You've even earned the right to change your mind, if you like, once the problem here is resolved. I think I might come to visit you. I find that I am quite fond of you. She beamed at me, and I restored time and let her back into the crystal. That's
I'm gonna need a little bit more explanation.
We're warping our little brains, man.
sorry, what?
We're warping our little brains. Might
Freaking
not
out.
good, so
I told you there was a big twist, right?
Yeah, it is, but I'm a little confused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm totally, who's
Who's
talking?
I?
Who's I?
X.
Yes.
Yeah, but
God,
Creator
X.
of all.
Of
The
the creator
supreme
of all.
deity X.
Is this like the Gulch of Souls? Is that what the whole world is? What is this?
It's a regular world. There's an immortal guardian who happened to develop the ability to feel mortal emotions, which created a big brouhaha in the world of the gods, because they don't feel shit.
Really?
Yes, because they're gods. There's what is a bridge between gods and human and mortals, right?
Okay.
It
And it's solace.
is Solace, right? Soul is she's a solar guardian. Solace.
Okay.
Her name is actually Is, which is,
Yeah.
right? Which is exists, right?
Right.
Which is
Yeah. Yeah.
um
I didn't connect those dots by myself, but thank you.
yes. But yeah, so she's created a bit of a disruption in the immortal world.
So I will say this. Switching from when, because there's no place else in the book where you use I
Correct.
when talking.
Right.
So is that because? I mean, obviously they're the creator, but it really throws you. Like I mean, just as
Supposed
the
to.
reader,
Yeah, I feel.
I'm like, wait, I'm all right.
That was the.
That's the whole point. I told you there was going to be a big switch, right? I'm going to take the scaffolding that I built for you. I'm going to toss it away and replace it with a whole new one.
I think that last chapter could be multiple, or at least longer.
Could be.
Yeah. With connecting more dots for us mere mortals who.
It might be easier to see it. I'm not sure.
The
Yeah,
creator
it
behind
becomes
the
a-
curtain.
okay.
Yeah,
The
pay more
curtain is-
attention.
In this case, behind the curtain is the actual.
Visuals.
Not just an.
So
But
he's admitting that he's been lying to you a little bit, right? The people who are reading this Bible, right?
Manipulated.
It's the whole reference to this being a Bible
They're gonna
because it's
Manipulated. That
it's
was
a book
cool.
of stories written by a god, right?
Yeah, that was cool because it makes people feel closer to the deity. That
Right.
that was spot on.
And so this tie to Earth, right? Like, is this like a universal God? So like
Apparently.
are multiple worlds.
Apparently the supreme deity of all the multiverses.
The multiverses.
It's a big, listening to it for the second time, it's a big shift from deeper emotions to very little emotions. That's one thing I'm just
That's a
noticing.
good point.
Where for me personally, like going deep and then being like, and here's some people who are just barely adding a little emotion is an interesting, like, it's totally counter.
Or at least not relating to the emotions we know about. They
Right,
have their
right.
own.
That is the entire story. So the entire story is the fact that those gods are, think of them as sort of mildly autistic, right? They don't understand emotions at all, but there's one creature that is immortal that serves as a sort of weird bridge between mortals and immortals, and they're learning from it, and that's it.
No.
But the person who's writing the story doesn't understand emotions, and so the entire story is written in a way that reflects the fact that he's trying, but he doesn't know how to do it.
So tools. These were tools
Yes,
to put them in these different
so it should piss you
situations.
off a little bit. It's like, holy shit, this is all pawns on a chessboard. He
Yeah.
doesn't care. He can like, whatever, this whole thing can be destroyed. I can replace it tomorrow. Who cares? It's totally random, right?
Simulation.
Right. It's a
Kind of a
version.
simulation. Let's reboot.
That
I'm being played.
13th floor. Yeah, so,
Right, yeah, right.
It's a video
So-
game.
Reset.
New life.
Anybody on the Zoom?
yeah. So the next book is How Souls Came Down.
Perhaps. There's a lot of, I still
There's some
haven't finished
sequels here.
reading the epilogue, so there's a lot of threads.
Yeah, that last
Right.
chapter definitely could take a little longer to connect some of these dots for me.
You might want to actually even have somebody point out to the deity that they are kind of autistic, right? Like
So what?
What you said?
people don't get it, right? Like the bridge could be pointing out to the deity that like you maybe the deity has a blind spot, right? Like they don't necessarily realize how out of touch they are with emotions, and there's still things they don't get. Like I think you can go deeper even on the final chapter. You can develop the deity more.
Well, I don't want to, right? He's supposed to feel detached and,
Yeah, detach. Yeah,
right? I mean,
get
it's
that
a
too.
message that's being sent, right?
Well, it's kind of the ultimate protagonist if the deity learns from something.
But he is learning, right? So there's a couple of moments where you know is pointing out, okay, maybe you're getting a feel for this, right? But at the end of the day, it's still an emotionally stunted, omnipotent creature.
It's like the ultimate puppet master. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's
The
way
ultimate
the hell
puppet
out
master. So
here.
this is a puppet master story.
I was gonna say,
Yes,
What-
and that's where, okay.
Sorry, what life lesson do you want us to take away? What if
How
one,
random existence is. ultimately.
just that how random.
Like whether it's
existence is,
evolution
gods
or
don't give a
creation,
shit.
like if you think about gods, then
They-
that's the
Exactly what I'm feeling, like none of this matters, of course, none of it.
But- So you want people to
That's
think
the
none of this
message.
matters?
Yes,
That's the
that is
message you
message,
want them to
that
have, right?
Existence is extremely random and arbitrary.
Because I really feel like in the second to last chapter, I'm being pulled in
Bravo.
for this nice hug after this long book
Yes.
and like really settling in. And then the very next chapter at light speed, it gets thrown on the floor and I'm like, what happened?
And I think that's what he's after.
That's exactly what I'm after. It's supposed to piss
Then
you
it
off a little
works.
bit,
The universe just hit you with the two
but
buttons.
it's not coming.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
lot coming.
Oh, he's got your hug right there.
It's not a hug. Emotions, your guys are expressing tremendous emotionality, which tells me that this thing is working exactly the way I want it to. Even if the emotions are like, not pleasing ones, I got,
No, I'm kidding.
it hits, right? Clearly, because everybody's pissed off. And it's exactly what I was aiming for.
Yeah.
True
thank
to
you.
form.
Awesome.
Well,
I look forward to the rest of
I promise.
I mean, it may have more later. So that's.
I'm looking forward to the roast of Brock Angle.
I know.
The what?
I'm kidding.
We're just planning your roast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for people
That's
to come
right.
back.
We're seeking comfort, wine and food. And cover.
And
That's what, we're having hugs in the form of wine and food.
I have to say that I see a lot of emotions around the room and some in the faces on the Zoom. So clearly,
What are the emotions you see?
I see all sorts of things, right? It's
I'm just, that was the actual question. Yeah. Don't be a god. Describe them.
don't understand. Epilogue. Once Is was in the crystal, things turned around quickly. The crack healed and the excited volcano calmed itself with a minor suboceanic eruption. The massive stone storm that surrounded the peninsula quieted down shortly after that. The Deep Shallows monsters, who no longer felt threatened, went back to their lairs, and Lavatown slowly returned to normal. The Prime died from the sniper shot, leaving behind a leadership vacuum. When the assassin's body was pulled from the ocean, it turned out to be Hortus. In the ensuing power struggle, Henrielle put to use her unique, deep knowledge of Lavatown and the Guild and became the new Prime. She thought of it as a fresh kind of adventure and would spend several decades running the Guild and serving as Lavatown's head of government. Under her guidance, a historic formal cooperation agreement was signed with King Emeka, much to the dismay of the Church of Frey. After his heroics in protecting Lavatown in its most dire moments, for hours effectively serving as its last meaningful line of defense, Aidan became a folk hero. He was offered the post of lieutenant, but declined it. His suggestion of promoting Darren to the post for being the last one standing next to Aidan in the tunnels was approved unanimously. Neither of them realized that Henrielle, as the new Prime, made sure the appointment was confirmed. He was pleased with Darren's role in unearthing the conspiracy against the Guild. Soon after, Aidan and Garrett went adventuring, and over time, the sight of the gnome riding the werewolf became common folklore. They would still come to Lavatown ever so often, and those in the council chamber, when they did so, would look in astonishment as the werewolf walked in, let the gnome off his back, and casually transformed into his elven form. Rajiv, who had almost died trying to heal 1,000 soldiers' injuries, spent weeks in rehabilitation, tended to his son. In the meantime, Lomek took over all of Rajiv's duties and discovered that he could do even more for the needy than his father ever did, albeit in different ways. He added staff and trained them in the ways of Thor. The renamed Church of Ascendants grew just as important as the inn, the library, and the whole house. After he recovered, Rajiv was appointed as the new Brunt in recognition of his impressive logistical capabilities during the last-ditch effort to keep the city safe. He spent the last 14 years of his life injecting a measure of compassion into Lavatown's internal administration. For one thing, nobody ever fell to their death off the stairway again. Niall stayed with Lomek, and they finally admitted that they were in love. They lived for a while in a little house her mother owned in Green Park District. When Niall became fertile a few years later, they had a child, and they named her Solace. After Rajiv passed away, Lomek handed off running the increasingly influential church to his most promising disciple, and their little family took off to track down Lomek's roots. It turned out that he came from Clan Tallgrass. The elders remembered him and honored him with the title of diplomat, which had belonged to his birth father. They eventually set up a small trading company, a first of its kind to originate in Descentia. It led them to travel to many places, including the South. And it was in the South where Lomek finally discovered that he was not a healer after all. Iz stayed in the crystal, taking care of 2 fiercely combative soul dragons, and patiently waited for her 4 friends to come visit her. I'm still not sure why, but she seems to find the whole thing enjoyable. A benefit of having her full awareness means that she cannot be ejected again by incompetent wizards or their greedy masters causing the crystal to crack. I wonder if she ever figured out who it was that ended her previous world like that, back when our story began, even if in retrospect, they did her a favor. She never asked me. Then again, I know how much she likes puzzles. That's it. There is nothing more to tell. With that, I have come to understand that mortals enjoy this sort of closure, so I'll sign off in the same way that he did much earlier in the story, in a moment when he didn't act as my mouthpiece. And so, without further ado, Garrett, out.
Garrett.
Yeah.
Barack Angel.
That's your little hug.
I don't know if y'all.
Nice, yeah.
I would do that,
Way to
Kevin.
pull the nose up.
Sorry. Very well done. Very well done. One of the like a perfect example of I would have been really good with more detail on a few things because I have trouble connecting dots. But like an example was Lomek decided or found out he wasn't a healer after all. Like, wait, I thought that was like part of the thing. He was going down that path because his dad was it?
That his dad is Rajiv.
And he was the healer, and he did.
And Lomek is convinced he's a healer because he had the calling. From,
right. And you build us up, and then all of a sudden, just
But
right
he's
now, you said he's not.
He's actually a wild mage, correct? But because wild mages can emulate and create every possible effect for the most part, as long as it's instantaneous.
Oh, he's a healer.
So he's like, I'm a healer. So, but remember that he talks about there's some things I can't do that my dad can do.
Yeah.
right? That's because there's things he can't emulate.
I
that-
thought it was because he was mature.
I know, that's what he thought.
Could he discover what he is rather than what he isn't instead?
Well, that will have require me to change the whole story, but regardless, but regardless, the whole point behind this is that there's timelines, right? So
Yeah.
it's gonna take him 200 years from this point, or 250 years from this point. Like to figure this stuff out. It's not a. And what's happening, I don't know if you caught this, right? So Lomek is a descendant of Kenzer, who is Thor, who's the god Thor,
Right.
which is why Thor heard his dire, desperate need for, for becoming a divine healer. And like say, yeah, I'll do it. You can be that. Let me give it to you, right?
Mhm.
But it didn't work because he isn't. He's something else. And wild mages are wild mages, and they want to change. Thor is a minor god. He doesn't still know how to like change somebody's nature that way, right? So there's a lot of like subtle layers that are behind all of this.
Are
But
there other kinds of mages? Or
yeah,
they're all wild?
those wizards who learn the trade and they're operating internally through a structure, they facilitate magic
Like apprentice.
in a structured fashion, so they can do things that wild mages can do. They can do stuff that lasts. And wild mages just emulate, they create magic on the spot, but there's nothing structured about it. Every time they do something, it will come up differently depending on how they're feeling or what the weather is like.
I've missed that
Yeah, I didn't.
distinction, but I get it. I understand it. Very cool. Very cool.
I personally really love the image of Aiden and Garrett kind of riding around.
I guess filed it
Yeah.
out. I'm like, I get a sticker to that.
Yeah,
Elicited a laugh.
that was a good visual. And then they get to where they're going. He hops down, turns back into an elf.
Yeah,
Or-
pretty much.
I'm just picturing Garrett going, wee.
Yeah. Right, a werewolf. That's right.
But yeah, if you were reading the book now, you would go back to like Act 2, Chapter 5, and you'll see Garrett out right there, and you'll be able to kind of read that area, that part of the book, and say, holy shit, this is like where the god is talking to him.
Yeah.
Right? There's all these ties back to what happened before that will change your understanding of the book. So I tell you that if you were reading this, you are now going back to look for all of the indicators.
Yeah.
So like people always that I've seen always comment of the that I use weird phrases like in this time moment, not in this moment in time. That's because it's the God that's writing it doesn't really have a context of time, so he's kind of using the wrong phrases for it in a way. Because from his perspective, time is kind of like a stretchy thing that you can move
Yeah.
back and forth, whatever you like.
These beings are linear and limited.
Right. So for him, it's not a moment in time. It's a time moment, right? So there's little things like that and they're strewn throughout the book. There's one on every page. There's one little thing on every single page that tells you that this is somebody else speaking, but you wouldn't know it until you read the very last chapter.
This is worth reading twice.
Yeah, what's possible idea chew on? You don't have a prologue, right?
The prologue is Spark.
But but what if there was a prologue to the prologue? What if for people who this is less familiar with, this sort of trope, you gave a little more like what you might look for? Because I think you could quickly forget it, or I might read a prologue, get a little bit of a hint, quickly forget it. And then when you get to the reveal,
That's a trigger.
it would be less of a like drop off a cliff and a little more like, a little more of like a bouncing back, just a thought.
Connection.
Well,
Yeah,
if
or
this thing,
what to look for,
if this thing
just
ever
thought.
gets published, I'll probably write a little preface, right?
Okay,
that would
preface,
service
yeah,
that,
or
That would
like-
service that, right?
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
that though could be interesting for,
Yeah, that's intended, that will be there, right?
Yeah.
You're an inspiration to us all. It's a spectacular job for first nonfiction.
Thank you.
Spectacular job.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Thank you.
I love being part of
the
this
job
process.
here.
I love
Thanks for
that.
bringing us on this journey.
No, thanks. It's a really surprising ending.
I mean, I can tell you that it's very hard.
of all things we have been through.
For what it's worth, it's
Through the
very hard.
sewer.
It's very hard to write this book when I know where it's leading
yeah.
the whole way through. and not,
I mean, to flesh out detail, to do.
well,
go down
but to build the story for you, like create a scaffolding here, when I know that I'm actually here.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you where we are, like I literally don't wanna even like.
Yeah, but that's a trickster's paradise.
Mhm.
And so that's, remember I mentioned sometime a couple of months back, I said there's an unreliable narrator problem.
I remember you alluding to
And this is
something
what-
you haven't seen yet, or not
Well,
something.
I
just a
even use the
character.
words, I even use the words false narrative, right? I
Yeah.
mentioned the murder of Roger Ackroyd, which is what inspired this.
Yeah.
And I love that
We're
book
gonna add
so
another
much, and
chapter
what
on
Agatha
like-
Christie,
This
it's
is
literally
us
the same
writing a
thing.
book about-
You get to the
about
very
Rock.
last
Book
chapter,
about becoming a-
and then she like rips the wool over your eyes and basically tells you, you know, the entire thing you just read was a lie.
Those don't exist.
Right? Which is really, really cool, right? And I love that so much that I tried to do it in fantasy form. And clearly you were surprised.
Clearly.
And so, at least in that sense, I managed to hide it well enough, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, this was totally unexpected.
I heard so many theories about what this
How
is.
are the gang on,
I
Mike
think
and Julie,
Rich-
you haven't blinked.
Rich was about.
Do you
to
have a
say
fake photo up? I'm just wondering. You're off dancing and having pizza and you just have this, thank you for moving. You have this, like, what's happening?
Cardboard
It's good to
cutout.
move.
I got lost at the green eggs and ham part.
Do you need us to go back? So there's this.
Yeah,
picture.
like- I will eat them on a train. I will eat them in the rain. That was really good.
Right, well, the part people mess up is they think the eggs and the ham are green, it's actually only the eggs.
Well, the eggs are,
But there's no train and there's no ham.
well,
It's green eggs, comma, and ham.
oh, and then you discover that they're to be like a banana.
Banana.
That was the first
That one,
use
that's
of
what the
I,
Oxford
yeah.
comma.
The what?
The first use of I. And that's when I showed up.
Right. It's finally basically saying, yeah, okay, that's the time for me to kind of like show myself, right?
Yep.
I mean, which then the last chapter and the epilogue are written from his viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
But he's no longer hiding it.
Yeah, and Corey, you survived, you escaped SFO Bart. I'm so impressed that you weren't trapped in a hellish eternity there in your own.
Yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to be there in person, but
Gosh, no,
yeah,
I'm-
there were.
Survived.
Thanks for trying them. And braving Bart.
Yeah,
Were
and
there-
Corey, you've already read this in editorial form, I imagine, yes? No, not.
This is the first time he's.
Oh, okay,
I read up to 3,
okay, just curious, yeah.
but Barack recommended me to stop there until the reading.
So did you expect Garrett to be the supreme BDX?
No, I expected there was something odd about him, but I didn't think it was that.
To report some champagne.
Oh, sure, yeah, I mean, and again, thank
Celebrate.
you so much for going on this journey with me. Rich, I have to know if you say anything, so.
Yeah, well, I have a couple problems. My internet is not awesome right now, so I didn't want to try to interrupt a lot. But here's my thoughts. I'm gonna be chewing on this and reflecting back. I think it was a very effective construct because it's gonna capture my mind and my imagination for probably a couple nights, and I am gonna go back and review it. And I still have a lot of editing to do now that I'm finally getting my office set up again and I'm starting to become functional. So as I go back and read it well, and video editing, I'm gonna be damn it. Yeah. And there's gonna be a lot of that. So I will, very well done. I'm gonna be chewing on it because so I think that's the measure of it being a memorable, effective piece of Baroque canon for whatever you do next.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's what I want, right? I want you to think about it, right? So thank you. That's exactly what I'm hoping.
Oh, I'm gonna go back and read. Because
And by the way, I want to offer this to anybody who wants it.
Send me-
If you want access to the manuscript, just let me know.
I do.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, no hesitation.
We did all together, like if you continuous time, you know,
Yeah.
having a break in between and then trying to regroup your from what happened last week.
Yeah, and being able like to skip over the parts that are fresh, kind of, or that I knew that, but it will help me connect some more dots.
You can have the manuscript,
Yes.
right, but you can't change it.
You mean it's read only? Wait,
Photo of your board, like your thing where you were connecting all the dots and figuring out like.
It's not a word board. I wrote a
What?
big document that has all of that stuff in it.
I just wanna see that.
I'm happy to share that with you
I
too.
just wanna see that organizational, like.
Yeah, sure.
I like that. idea.
You
So
realize,
Don't like, there's a lot of things in the background that are just infusing the story, but you don't know about. So for example, let me share something with you, right? It's in that storyboard that didn't make it into the book, but it's influencing the book. So the whole thing about how these people that take this psychic trip to Earth
Yeah.
bring back terminology.
Hmm.
Right, so you remember at the very end there's like a whole comment that I'm saying, did she ever figure out who it was that caused the crack in the crystal in the first place? Right, well, the person who, do you know, any of you figure it out?
No.
Okay, so the person who caused the crack in the crystal is Gino Ferntenga, right? The husband of Nael's mom in Rio.
Oh.
Right, and that happened a couple decades ago. He figured out that there was a crystal, he found it out, and he like hired this very high level wizard out of the Royal Wizardry College, right? And said, hey, figure this shit out for me. I think this is interesting, right? And the wizard failed,
Okay.
creating the crack. That started the story. But what happened is they were psychically linked. So Gino got to take this like trip, this kind of hellish trip to Earth by spiritual form. And he ended up here at like around the year 2000. And he got this like absolutely bizarre images of like Star Wars. That's where stormtroopers came from. He introduced the name stormtroopers because he saw like images of stormtroopers from Star Wars in his mind when he was like visiting Earth, right? But he also got exposed to a whole bunch of like Aryan nation stuff, which is why he suddenly became super racist after he came back. And Riel touches on that when he did something he shouldn't have done. She mentions that he did something he shouldn't have done. That's the thing he did that shouldn't have done, and like totally screwed with his mind. It turned him into this like crazy, KKK version of right. That's what happened there. There's another wild mage that made that psychic trip about 200 years ago, and he brought back ideas like the printing press and photography. He also happened to meet Nietzsche, and he influenced Nietzsche for creating his idea of perspectivism and nihilism, because Nietzsche meant this guy, right? But that's not in the book, but it's in the book. So it's in the book in very subtle ways. But there's a lot of stuff in my storyboard, as you call it,
Yeah.
that's not actually I'm not talking about, but it's
like
influencing the story, right? Which is so there's
made
a
me-
lot going on here, right?
Yes, there is, and there's room for it all.
I think there's, it's okay, make it.
Yeah, epic.
Well, I can make it into 3 books, right? But
Yes, epic. And you have like, it's some almost like the Marvel comic character. This guy can have his own story and that
This
guy can have his own.
trilogy, I try to compress it, and I try to follow industry guidelines. So industry guidelines say fiction novels, 80 to 120,000 words with a strong preference to the middle range. So
How much
this
is
is
it?
at about 106,000. So I
Really?
really try to kind of like find drill right there. So that influences the length of what I'm discussing and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
If I turn it into 3 books, which it can easily be 3 different books, like the trilogy,
Good.
then I will have 3 times as much.
And you
story.
have themes where you could end.
Oh, many,
end
so
with.
many. There's so many.
You really
things I
have some
skip.
good ones.
There's so many things I skip.
If there was any high level recommendation, we make this into a bigger thing.
But that's the whole, so there's so much, yeah, I mean, thank you for bringing up the story, but I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants to read it, like the background behind the background, it's about 15 pages of notes.
Can I open this one?
That I'm happy to share with anybody who wants to look at.
yeah, Brian, you're gonna make it really impossible for anyone to ever editorialize or other rights review or to try to completely change it, because you've been so intentional with a lot of language and elements that could
No, it's not. No,
cut it out, or even just pretend, thinking people might think, oh, that's an improper pronoun or a grammar or what. They can't change a thing.
They can. I mean, Corey's been doing a good job of catching some of my stupid grammar stuff, right? But the places where it's in the intentionality is there, then I didn't let him make the changes he wanted to. So
Okay.
Thanks, Corey, for that help. But now you perhaps understand why there's places where I told you, nah, sorry. I mean, that just can't.
Yeah, it's fine.
Would actually go for more of those rather than less of those. Because even double the amount of. Then people still might, you'd be surprised how much you can give away.
I know, but it doesn't make me know. That's exactly.
I think it's not noticeable enough.
Well, that's not so Allison, okay, here's the thing, this is what happens when a pro looks at this, right? I hired somebody to look at this who's a creative writing teacher. She read 4 chapters, she says, I don't know if you mean it or not. I was shocked by this, right? She read 4 chapters, the spark, solace, and then what was it? The child and moment, right? She read those 4 chapters and she talks to me on the phone and she says, it's intentional or not, but I get a very slight sense of almost like somebody who's autistic writing this. I'm like, fuck, you're good. She picked up on it.
She figured it out.
Yep, 4 chapters. She figures this shit out.
Of course she did. That's Allison.
Now, and I'm like, I can't even tell you how brilliant you are because I tried so hard to hide it.
Yeah.
Right? To like make it right. It's there, but it's intentional and all that stuff. Nope, she got it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so to what you said, perhaps a casual reader might not see it, but somebody who's a pro will.
You're not writing for
And it's a very hard, but she's also the one who's told me, because she's now read a whole bunch of the book, about half the book, and she's like, the craft, for her, the craft is incredible. That's what she told me.
That's
Craft
what
is
you
incredible.
want to get.
And she keeps coming back to craft. The craft is really good.
All right, I'm gonna open this for you.
Anyway,